Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions in the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. On this show, I interview lawyers ditching the billable hour and experts who can help attorneys move beyond billing time. Thanks to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes. More on them later, and use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED when signing up. You get 10% off, and it supports the show. The best way to support the show is to share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. I'm thrilled to have with me on the podcast today, Jim Sullivan. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jim, just in case people haven't come across you yet, or your company, eDiscovery AI, tell us a little bit about who is Jim and what is eDiscovery AI?
So I'm mostly a tech nerd, but also a lawyer. I sort of come from a background in computer science, and early on in my career, I did a little bit of doc review, and then from there, I moved on to eDiscovery focused consulting on eDiscovery matters. And now we're kind of back around full circle, building tools that use AI to do doc review. So reviewing documents with AI instead of people is kind of the direction we're looking at.
Well, you're in good company on the podcast because the lawyers who listen in hate billing time, and eDiscovery, which you'd think at the time this episode goes live, I'll be almost at 100 episodes. You'd think after almost 100 episodes, we'd have had a good discussion about eDiscovery yet, but we really haven't. And it was the dawn of AI in the legal profession, and it took away billable time. But the lawyers listening in and the folks listening in, we're looking for ways to speed up processes effectively and efficiently. So you're in good company, like I said, but give us some background on your experience. Like, do a little bit more of a dive on like your experience billing time, doing doc review, and like just a little bit of the history of eDiscovery.
I might bring back some traumatic moments of doing doc review. So yeah, starting out with doc review. Doc review is probably the perfect example of just billing time for the sake of billing time. Early on I think it was 2007 I was doing it, and it became apparent very early on that the purpose of doc review was to generate billable hours. There was no questions around what you're working on. There's no question around the quality of your rework, the quality of your review. The only thing that mattered was, is your butt in the seat long enough that we can bill enough time for it? The only real issues that ever came up were, number one, if you go too fast, and it was crazy because I had the first matter was the easiest case I've ever seen. It was literally all one-page emails, and it was like, if it talks about this topic, it's relevant. So, coming to law school, I have all sorts of ambitions. I'm like, yeah, let's seize, let's conquer the world, let's do this. And I'm going through and I'm like, all right, relevant. And I'm just like, all right, this is, we're going to do this all day, right? And then I get called back and they're like, Jim, we're concerned that you're going too fast. And I was just like, I don't think I could go slower. I without like just not doing work. We're talking, 100 docs an hour when each doc's one page. Like, I'm spending 30 seconds on a doc, and you're just, and yep, sure enough, had to slow it down because you can't go too fast on a billable rate. But that really opened my eyes to a couple of things. There was a lot of inefficiencies I saw that seemed to be geared around just generating more billables, reviewing documents that were absolutely unnecessary to be reviewed, basically spam, things that were automated reports that just, I think we had something like 200,000 automated reports that you could have run a keyword search for all emails sent from reports@whatever.com. And you could have wiped them out in a second, but they insisted that we review each one at a time. And so that kind of opened my eyes to billable hours in the worst case scenario. So moving from there, consulting on eDiscovery, my biggest focus was, let's find ways to make this better, improve this. Let's use methods, analytics, tools to make this process more efficient, more effective, and more importantly, more accurate. So, predictive coding came out then, using machine learning to train the system to classify documents. And that's what I really focused on. I had about 10 years of consulting on predictive coding and analytics matters, basically trying to find ways to use technology to make doc review more efficient. And then that really comes around when now with AI, it is just the most powerful tool we've ever seen. And the things that it can do are incredible. And one of the things it's absolutely best at is classifying documents for relevance. Looking at a document, determining whether it's relevant or not relevant to a particular issue or case is just that's the best use case AI has. And it can do it with a level of accuracy that's far exceeds any human, speed that no human's ever going to touch. A lot of the little things like it doesn't miss things in long documents. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't get bored. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't take weekends off. So it's just fundamentally better around. But it does get to this point of addressing the problem of how do you bill hours for things when you're trying to build efficiencies. And it is kind of a conflict just fundamentally where, I love building automations. I love building tools. I like making things more efficient. But as a lawyer, you kind of don't get rewarded for making things efficient. You're kind of rewarded for taking longer to do something sometimes. So that's just something that I've always found a little bit frustrating and challenging. And hopefully we can, solve, some of that, at least with the doc review portion of billing time and how we're basically incentivizing people to drag their feet, go slow, and not be as efficient as they can, trying to find kind of another way.
Right. And I mean, I just want to pull on a thread that you mentioned, and you mentioned it for a second, but highlight it for my audience. And you said more accurate, right? These AI tools are more accurate. And some people might be like, well, wait. What about hallucinations? What about all these things that we've heard of in these stories? And it's like, oh, okay, yes, AI is not perfect. You didn't say perfect. You said more accurate. People, humans, who, if we're not using AI, they're going to be reviewing these things. You think a human is not going to make a mistake? Right? Like, isn't it that just AI, if it does make mistakes, it's more reliable in that you can anticipate what those mistakes are, and you can even use AI to overcome those mistakes, right? So, like, tell a little bit about that, and like, can't you ask it like percentages, like what is the percentage that this is going to be relevant or not relevant, and can't you like have it run on all the items deemed non-relevant? It could run like another thing. It's like, well, double check, like, and go through, right? And it could be like in an instant, right? So talk a little bit more about that.
I mean, and that's the thing that, really it kills me, because you're like, AI is finding 95% of the relevant documents in a data set, and humans are finding 70%.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, but AI can hallucinate. And you're like, we just proved that they were way better. I mean, what, like that's the measure. Are they getting the right answer? And yeah, they, it might get the wrong answer every now and then, but overall still far more accurate. And, it's like, you look at it like, if it was like a comic where you have, this kid handing in a paper that's getting a D and the computer handing in a paper that's getting A minus, and you're like, well, the computer's broken. Like, well, I mean, compare, like, no one's going to question. The quality of doc review is something that has not, really been brought up a lot, but it is absolutely embarrassingly bad. And it's bad for a number of reasons. It's not all, terrible as much as reviewing documents all day, every day is a tedious process that just causes you to hallucinate yourself. I mean, that's just all what it is.
Like real hallucination.
Like, I mean, the ability to sit and review documents all day, every day is not something humans are equipped to do. I mean, that's really just not something that we are good at, that we are fundamentally built to do. And then the second piece is just the information that we're doing. I mean, luckily, my first matter that I mentioned was a tech issue. It was a tech case, tech company. Everything was, nerdy. Everything was something I was really knowledgeable about. But my second case was about, scientific studies, and I didn't know anything. And the first case, you could tell the people that weren't knowledgeable about the issues, and you can't get a group of people that are experts on every single issue. And the worst thing was when we reviewed those couple 100,000 alert emails that were system generated reports, we QC'd them, and there was at least 10,000 that were just flat out wrongly coded. So not only did we basically waste time by having humans review them when we could have just mass tagged all of them based on a search, the result of it was that there was a high level of errors that then had to get QC'd in second round. And it's across the board, you're just looking at the level of accuracy. And, we talk about hallucinations, and AI will hallucinate a very small percentage of the time. But with doc review, when we're asking for classifications, we're saying, is this document relevant or is it not relevant? It doesn't really have an opportunity to make stuff up. The worst it could do is it could get the answer wrong.
Right.
And the reality is we're calculating how many times it gets the answer wrong, and the number of times it gets it wrong is far less than humans have ever been capable of. I will tell you that, for research, we use a lot of different data sets. One of the data sets we use is just my own personal emails from a business I used to run. And I've reviewed documents myself for the emails for topics that I'm knowledgeable about. Like, I know this data set more than anyone else in the world. It's mine. I know every email that gets sent and received. And I'll have AI review the documents for the same issue. And every single time, AI will beat me in accuracy. And I've never won on a data set of 100 docs or more where AI just finds things that I'm not finding. And a lot of times I'm looking at the conflicts and I'm saying, all right, well, yeah, I missed that. AI was right on that one. AI was right on that one. And then it even explains how. So I'll say, oh, no, I was right on this one. And then I read the explanation and I'm like, all right, I was actually wrong on that one too. So, it is, we're comparing it to a human. We're comparing it to all of the available alternatives, predictive coding things. And it's just more accurate than anything that we've ever considered using.
So a few things just to point out. So for those of you who are not listening, QC short for quality control. Just in case, we're talking about mostly lawyers listening in, Jim. They're not all techies like us. And then a couple more things is just wanting to point out that we are saying the quiet part out loud here, and that is that lawyers are not really worried about, lawyers and law firms that bill their time are not really worried about the quality of the output. They're worried about the reduction in billable time. Because, the data show that the AI is better and more accurate, like we're talking about. So, that's the real pushback. I don't want to spend any more time on that because, this audience gets it. You're not going to get any pushback here. But the other thing you said, I think, is really important, and that is that you did a litmus test. And you started with, and I think this is true, and you could extrapolate this to any use of any AI tools, whether that's, eDiscovery AI for the eDiscovery aspect of a law practice, or your legal AI assistants for everyday stuff, like your Paxtons, is what I've used, or your spell books or whatever, right? It's use these tools in a way where you already know, or you should know, what the output is going to be when it's accurate. And then you can start to maybe leverage it for other things once you get comfortable with the tools. And frankly, one of the reasons I use Paxton compared to some of these other tools that does what Paxton does is I have a complicated legal research question that I like to ask every new a legal AI tool that purports to be good at legal research or answering legal questions. And Paxton got it right faster and better before it even was connected to case law. It got the answer right compared to some of these other legal AI tools, even the ones by the big two legal research tools, right? So having a litmus test is a really great technique when demoing or testing out these tools. And so like what you did with, you worked with a data set that you were intimately familiar with. This is a great thing for somebody to do. And whether you're a solo like me and you're doing it yourself, or find a team member that you can do something like this with whenever you're testing out a new AI tool for the first time. That's lawyers don't always think that way. We're more problem solvers post problem than pre-problem. So I feel like that's a really important thing I just wanted to highlight. And did that bring anything to mind that you want to share?
Well, yeah, actually, two things. And one of them, you mentioned, reason why they don't want to use AI in eDiscovery. And one of the concerns I have is that a lot of it is based on just the defensibility of, they're afraid that a judge is going to say, no, you can't use this. Another party is going to challenge it. And that's one of the other hurdles we have to overcome as well, where, I always tell people, they're always like, well, that's a bad practice because it's going to make mistakes. And I say that anytime your argument is, I use the human to make a decision, you're going to win that argument in court. So, whether or not I believe it's right or wrong, the argument of, I use the human, a licensed attorney looked at this and made a decision, you're not going to ever lose that argument in court. And that, in my opinion, is a little bit of a problem, because a human looking at it does not necessarily mean it's first of all, it's, not necessarily the best approach, not best use case, but we're in a world right now where you cannot go into a courtroom and say, that wasn't appropriate. You shouldn't have used an attorney to look at that and make that decision. So that's something, just another problem that, we have to overcome in the eDiscovery context. I like what you mentioned about the use of different tools, though, because this is one of the biggest, roadblocks to using AI is a little bit of that fear of, what if it hallucinates? I read about this case where a guy cited a case that was not real, and you're like, well, that's your attorney nightmare. Like, don't be the one that's on the news for citing a case that's not real. Like that's the last thing any of us want. And it's just, the reality is that's not going to happen to anyone that's watching this podcast, doing research on the issue, because nobody that I talk to thinks that they can have AI generate work product and then use that work product as their own without reading it. I mean, if you thought that, then we need to have a discussion about why you can't do that. Same as if you go on Google and you ask for information, you cannot copy and paste it, put it into a Word document, and submit that Word document as your own work without reading it. I mean, that's just, I think, something that we've all known for a long time. AI is there to assist you, similar to how a paralegal would, or any assistant, but the work product is still yours and you're responsible for the output. So, when you have it, writing a brief and citing fake cases, the idea is it should write a draft or an outline of a brief for you. And then you use that to create your final product after reviewing it all, verifying the sources, and confirming that everything is what it is. Because sometimes it's going to make arguments that aren't quite as good as the arguments you could have made. Sometimes it's going to include things that you might not have thought of, which is awesome, but sometimes it's going to include something that you don't want it to include. And so at every instance, you have to read the words that are written before you use them as your own. And I just don't think that any of us don't believe that to be true anyway. And so if you follow that one rule, do not use work as your own unless you've read it and verified the accuracy of that work. That will eliminate any concerns of using AI where it's hallucinating or not providing consistent results, and just understanding what it's there for. It's not there to do work for you. It's there to help you do work. And if you can get that, you'll never submit a brief that doesn't have cases that are real, because you're going to read each of the cases and you're going to understand. And, when you have a case that you're citing, if you don't know what that case is and you're using it in a brief, like, you need to read it and you need to figure out what that case is about. And that's where you're going to uncover, oh, this case isn't real, which, I'll tell you is only going to happen, if you're using AI in all your cases, this is going to be something that happens to you once or twice a year. And, that's not a justification for saying, oh, this isn't reliable, this isn't trustworthy. This is very, very reliable. It's very, very trustworthy. But like anything, you need to make sure that you're double checking the work before you use it as your own. And I think that it's one of those things that I think fundamentally we all know, but it's just because this is a little bit of an unknown area to a lot of people that they're just uncomfortable with venturing into new things. And lawyers are, typically very conservative on technology.
Right. You reminded me about how lawyers, I think, are going to be, once they get more comfortable with AI, I think they're going to actually really like it, especially the old guard. Because right now, even there are still lawyers practicing today that they will dictate, have a paralegal or a secretary type it up, print it out for them, bring it to them, they'll read it, they'll scribble notes or dictate changes. It goes back to the secretary or paralegal to type up the changes, and this takes hours and hours and hours and days and weeks and sometimes months for big giant, motions for summary judgment or whatever, right? Dispositive motions. Well, right now with AI, you can dictate to the AI, even like as of the date of recording with GPT-4o, like you could do it verbally, pretty good. It's only going to get better from here, but in particular in text, it's going to give you the document, which you're going to review just like you did before, because this is what, you were talking about, like review, this is what made me think of it. Then you could dictate back like immediately, because you're going to get the document immediately. Dictate back, here are the changes I need you to make, and it will make those changes immediately, right? And so like this is the way lawyers are already working with humans inefficiently, and because of natural language, they can now do this with AI tools, and it will be instantaneous, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things that I feel like if everyone understood the reality of what we have and what we're doing, everyone would be on board. everyone has a value for a way they can use this, exactly like you said, dictating, having it create it. And the other cool thing is you can say, hey, read that over and tell me if you think I'm missing any arguments.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it'll tell you, and would you be willing to spend the 3.5 seconds it takes to read what it says? Oh, you might want to consider this or this or this. And you might just say, yeah, I've thought of that and I decided not to. But, the value of it coming up with new ideas. Or you can have it read it and say, hey, do you see any holes, or do you see anything that, we might want to make corrections on it? Its ability to be that assistant, that paralegal, that person sitting next to you, just helping you with whatever you're doing. And I use it all day, every day. I literally have it open on my computer, sitting there where I can just ask questions. I can get information anytime I need to. And that could be, write me a script that's going to make this, these CSV files merge into do something else. Write me an Excel formula that will do X, Y, and Z. Create ideas for brainstorming for names of something that I'm trying to come up with. Write up an outline or a draft of a contract. And so all of these things that it can do that gets you, 90% of the way to a finished product, where now all you have to do is you have to review it and make modifications. That is just tremendously powerful. And I think it's something that, and the other thing I think is really, really important is, do not use AI for the first time when it's the biggest case of your life. Use it when it doesn't matter. Use it, and for eDiscovery especially, it's like, too many times people are like, well, I don't need AI. This is a small matter. This is a small matter. Oh, now I have this giant second request with tight timelines. We need AI here. It's like, well, this is not how your first use of AI should go. And, use it for things that don't matter. Get a feel for how it can understand things. Get a feel for what it can do. I always tell people the easiest use case you can have, sit down with ChatGPT, bring your kid, have it write stories for your kid for bedtime stories. Have it write pictures of what your kid, I mean, my kid loves more than anything to describe things and then have AI create it. And I'll tell you, it always ends up with something about bunnies and unicorns and kittens. And it'll be like, make a picture of a unicorn jumping over a rainbow with a cat on its back. And, it's great. And then it always just evolves into poops. It's like, always goes downhill. And then she just giggles about just anything that it says. But that's the type of stuff where you can get comfortable with it. Have it create an outline. Have it create a draft of something you're doing. Have it just come up with some arguments for you. Have it, another really great use case is just having it, summarize and review things. Anytime I create a contract, I will put that contract into AI and I'll say, read this contract. Tell me if there's anything that you think is missing or anything that's important or anything that could be wrong. Do a second check for me. So now I'm being the one that's creating, you're double checking and providing feedback. Same as whenever somebody sends me a contract that I have to review, I review it exactly as I would any contract at any time. And then I put it into AI and say, review this contract and let me know if there's any clauses that jump out at you as being unusual. And it always pulls out a couple things saying, well, this is a little bit unusual and you might want to take a look at that. And now I looked at all myself, and some of those times I'm like, yeah, I saw that and we're comfortable with it. But sometimes like, yeah, I didn't really think of it that way. So there's just so much value add that can be done without any actual, like, the term risk, I feel like, is overused, because if you're using it to take a second look at something, there's not risk there. So that's where there's so many valuable use cases that I think people, can get out of it for just about any job in any field.
Yeah, and at the time of publication, not for very long, iOS 18 will be out. So if you're an Apple user or Mac user, as far as I understand it right now, you could just ask Siri to do exactly what you said with the story time, right? So like that would be another way. So, when you're listening to this, you have an iPhone or an iPad or whatever, talk to Siri and ask it to write a story for your kid and then make images, because they literally just promoted that it will do this.
I mean, you literally will, say, hey, I have an 8-year-old daughter that, likes, write a story about her, fighting, saving the world from dragons and, whatever. And then you can even say like, and make it about, 2,000 words, because I don't want to stay up too late reading it, And it's fantastic. And, that's just such a small thing that's so cool for, and my kid just loves hearing every different story and the pictures. And it's just something that there was no way that you could have ever done that in the past.
Yeah, and it's really incredible. And if you're willing to, I think in your Photos app, tag all the people and give them names, you might even be able to give them your kid's name, and it will make pictures of your kid in that scenario, right? Like, I
I
we're
really
we're
love.
talking about the future here because we're in the past, but we're recording this. But it's gonna be pretty cool.
Well, I mean, right now, you know what I do a lot is I'll take pictures and I'll put them in and say create a princess, or in the style of a Pixar character, using this as a basis, and it will create a Pixar character of my daughter or my wife, and it's perfect. I mean, it's incredible. It's it looks exactly like them as a Pixar character, and that's just every kid loves that.
Right, right. Speaking of images and AI, though, going back to eDiscovery AI, I see that one of the things you have on here that it could help with is audio and image review. And so, just let's give it a little context around this. You talked about predictive coding. So back in the day with eDiscovery, as it was coming out and being more and more adopted, you had predictive coding, you had algorithms, you had different types of versions of AI than generative AI. But since the advent of generative AI, one of these fascinating things that it's able to do is this image and audio and video recognition and creation, but it's able to create because it could recognize it. So tell us about how you're leveraging that with eDiscovery AI and what a revolution it's been compared to like the old days of
That's
eDiscovery.
I mean, the really cool thing about this, and what I enjoy, is that we had so many problems in the past that predictive coding couldn't solve. And that was, foreign language was my nightmare. They'd have to have different models for different languages and train them, and then someone would always give up before it got there. And anytime I got a call saying, hey, we have this matter that's 3 different languages and they want to use predictive coding, I just be like, I'm busy that day, I can't wait. And then the second thing is anything that lacks text, images, audio, and absolutely nothing that you could really do with those. And now AI is just perfect at it. I can put in images and I can have it understand what those images are. And that's actually, images have been actually our biggest use case so far, where we're using it to do all sorts of things with images. That's a little bit outside of the discovery world in some sense, where one is, identifying inappropriate content in images. Whether that's nudity, whether that's violence, we can have it review a large volume of images and identify whether or not there's anything that we need to take a look at. Another thing is identifying copyright infringement via images, where you have a collection of copywritten images and have a collection of images you want to compare, and they'll tell you whether or not any of your copywritten images exist in this collection. Even though the image sizes aren't the same, the colors aren't the same, there's maybe some text on one that's not on the other, and it's just smart enough to get all of that. You were using it, security camera footage, identifying people that have issues at construction sites, whether they're not wearing a hard hat, or there's a safety violation, or the Tyvek wrap around the building is torn and there might be some potential for water damage. It can just review that and understand as well. I mean, kind of a security guard in some sense, where it can watch, security camera footage and identify different things that we would just want to alert somebody of. It might not be anything, but we want to just be able to send someone else and, hey, something's going on here, you might want to take a look at it. And I mean, the power of some of these image and video tools are incredible, because I think that we are not too far off the day where, instead of having a story to tell your kid at night, you're just going to have a movie that you can tell them. You can say, create me a movie about a 9-year-old princess who lives in a kingdom and fights dragons, and I want it to last 38 minutes before bedtime. And it will just be able to create it on the fly, and I think it's going to really change how we are entertained.
I don't know if the domain is available, Jim, but based upon what you're telling me, I almost feel like you should drop the E from eDiscovery AI and just call it Discovery AI, because like it's what you just described to me goes so far beyond. I mean, it could be very useful for litigation matters, or figuring out if there's any sort of dispute that's worth pursuing with a massive volume of video or footage or documents, right? But it could just be good just to discover things utilizing AI. I mean, I don't know. I mean, companies pivot all the time. What do you think about that?
No, and it's funny because I think we actually were looking at Discover AI early on, and
Well, that's close to like Discover, the financial company. You might be.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it's different, but
Um,
Discovery AI. I don't know.
so the thing I tell myself on a very regular basis, because ideas spinning around the head all day, every day, is we got to stay in our lane, because there are so many opportunities everywhere in every market and everything to do. And the reason we're in eDiscovery is because that's really what we know better than anything. If in eDiscovery, when you're talking about predictive coding, we have a team of people that have been doing predictive coding, analytics, understand the defensibility, the legal aspect of everything related to eDiscovery in a way that gives us a huge edge where we venture into other things, and now we're just another, competitor in the area. So that's one of the biggest things that we've, from a business standpoint, it's just been, let's stick at what we're really good at, because there's going to be a lot of things that are kind of tempting to spin off in different directions. And there's been a few times where we've started to veer in a way, and it's like, no, we've got to make sure we always have our focus, because there's so many opportunities that you blink and you could be down a different rabbit hole every day.
Yeah. Yeah. No. That's good. Definitely the lawyer listeners who are solo founders are thinking about it. When you're wearing your own hat as a business owner, that's a big problem. Is like, maybe I want to do this, maybe focus.
Yeah,
Focus
it's
is
the
important.
squirrel. You see a squirrel, you get distracted, and you're running back and forth, and the truth is, right now we're so early on with AI, and there's so many opportunities, and a lot of people haven't really even gotten understanding yet. Where, yeah, everywhere you look, it's just another opportunity, and it's just important to remember, kind of keep the focus on your business plan.
Yeah, and like I'm curious to know, and maybe some of the listeners are like the audio and image review. Like when I think eDiscovery, I think about like bulk discovery, right? Like a big amount. Like is that also how that's handled? Is like you could upload like a bunch of videos and have it like do the analysis on those videos? Like is that how that works? Or is it
Yeah,
one at a
and
time? Like how does that
and
work?
so how, the most common use cases are things like call centers, where you have call centers and you're recording calls all day, and you have a case and you want to figure out basically if any of the calls are talking about certain issues.
Right.
There's also some financial, institutions. I don't even understand how it works, but I know in the UK they have some open lines that are just open all day, and people are jumping on them and talking about financial things, and just being able to flag when they're discussing certain topics. So, yep, it's absolutely in the case of, of very generally speaking, it's going to be a large e-discovery matter with a ton of documents, but then this audio or image collection is going to kind of be part of the problem. I'd say images are a little bit more of a niche, where I would say most cases don't really have any images that are going to be relevant or matter to the case, and that's where some of those outline use cases make a little bit more sense. But audio is definitely very commonly an important piece, mostly phone call recordings or voicemails or other things.
Man, when you explained the call log thing to me, just like light bulbs going off again. It's like, well, that could be like if I'm Amazon, like maybe I pay you in advance so I could identify problems before they happen, utilizing the same exact technology.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's a bigger market opportunity than
Well, now you're
e-discovery.
talking, because I mean, that's the future. And it's not just audio, it's the future of everything. Where what happens when, instead of having a lawsuit where AI is reviewing all your docs and trying to find different things, why not have AI review your documents and emails as you send them and receive them, and flag any potential issues that could lead to future liability? And so you think of a large organization now, where they're already doing probably a lot of profanity filters. If certain keywords are hit, it gets forwarded over to HR and someone reviews it just to make sure it's not anything too inappropriate. But you could have AI analyzing every single conversation and seeking out situations that there would put the company at liability, creating some of those problems and being able to avoid them before they even become a problem. And then the second thing you could do with that is, by doing that, you're kind of cataloging all of the communications. And so that way, when you get sued and you say, okay, this person's alleging we did X, Y, and Z, you can just ask AI, are we doing X, Y, and Z? And be able to quickly identify basically the strength of your case, and is this something that we want to settle right away because we already found the smoking gun document. But you can imagine in a case where someone makes an allegation and you just ask AI, is anyone doing that? And then it comes back saying, yeah, here are 3 examples, and you kind of already know how your case is going to go. So I absolutely see a future where, it's a little big brothery, where, every organization every communication that you send out is being analyzed, cataloged by AI. And I think the only thing stopping that right now is just the cost is a little bit high to be able to do that. But as the cost comes down, that's kind of the natural conclusion of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, the Big Brother thing, did go, that bell rung in my head too. I'm thinking like, uh-oh, but like if you approach that in the right way, right? If it's like, hey, look, we heard this call happened, the AI flagged it, we listened to it. Now we're going to coach you on how to handle this thing in the future to avoid future problems, right? It's like how you handle that as a company with your employees. Like that's how overcome that kind of a thing, I think. And you do it the right way. You don't do it from like, we're watching you and if you screw up, you're screwed. No, like we're listening. We want to make sure, and that makes society better. That's a little bit more utopian of an
Yeah.
outcome than that,
And
right?
I mean, we all know that people are pretty willing to give up privacy pretty quickly. I think we've learned it. You're seeing it. I mean, I just, Amazon drivers and delivery people that have cameras inside the vehicle at all times, watching them, tracking them. And that's certainly just being done for the sake of overseeing and making sure it is basically being monitored. And I think that as people move forward, they're probably not going to fight too much on pushing back there. But as long my stance is always going to be, as long as it's your employer doing it, that you're consenting to being there and working to, and it's not a government organization overseeing things. You kind of what's in the best interest of the company, I have to believe, is to prevent situations that are damaging to the company. So yeah, if you're doing it to spy and snoop on your employees and try to get dirt on them or something, absolutely not okay. But if the purpose is we want to identify situations that are damaging to the company and be able to prevent any harm, that seems like something that would be very justified.
Right. And I mean, it's one of those instances where I think maybe some regulation around that might be good to help the companies have the guardrails of this is how you use the technology. This is what's allowed. If you go outside of this, the
Mhm.
company may be liable for some kind of statutory fine or something like
And I
that.
think
Right.
lawyers probably a really good spot to make, kind of be a part of that conversation. And, a lot of, it's no different than we have now where you have filters where certain keywords hit, it goes to HR and, and in most organizations that I've been involved with, well, if it hits on something, it's going to go to, either a lawyer or a person that's going to be able to review whether or not there's a problem without being judgmental about the fact that this person swears a lot, or, if it's just, as, straight up, oh, they just said a couple of words that were inappropriate, but it's not used in a context that's any harm. They're adults, great, no problem. But it's not going to people that are, you know, it's not going directly to your manager as much as going to kind of an independent third party that is allowed to make an assessment without being too judgmental. That seems like the type of balance that you need to have here, where it's not, not used as a gossip tracker as much as a liability avoider.
Right. Which I'm so glad you said that because that's a good, helpful segue into something you said earlier, which I wanted to touch on too, which is you mentioned avoiding a problem before it becomes a big problem. And that longtime listeners know that's the benefit of the subscription model for legal services is when you're not afraid to reach out to your lawyer before something becomes a big problem, we can help avoid that problem for our clients, right? And so you can't charge as much for that though, right? You
You're
can't.
going to hurt your billable hours if you're solving problems before they get bigger. How are you going to bill for that?
Right. So you bill on subscription and you continuously, one of the subscriber benefits, the forever promise, if you will, is you continue to help your clients avoid big, expensive legal problems in the future by helping them with problem avoidance. And instead of charging a lot when there's a big problem, you charge a little bit, but it's over a forever period of time. So the potential revenue, the lifetime value is significantly higher, which brings me to the business model of eDiscovery AI, which I do want to talk about. And that's sort of how we'll round out this conversation, because it sounds to me like you could already appreciate cannibalizing your business in the future. So we're like, in the event, because right now, eDiscovery, you want there to be litigation and a problem so that the tool can be leveraged and used to quickly and efficiently resolve it, right? And more cost effectively for the client, not necessarily for the law firm, but for the end client. But in a future where there's problem avoidance, your tool could still slot into that. You just have to have maybe a different business model, and it would be clients using it, not lawyers using it. So let's talk about your business model and what it looks like now.
Yeah, and I mean you're spot on. Where right now it's you need to review a large volume of documents, for production, to investigate issues, whatever it is that you want to find, your smoking gun, whatever your purpose is. We have this ability to quickly review and classify the documents for whatever issues you're looking for, determine what's relevant, what's hot, what key issues you want to have in your case, and really provide you a really huge advantage in litigation where now you have some flexibility, because if you have a huge matter, you could either review all the documents immediately, have every key doc identified, know the strength of your case within the first week. Or maybe you think it's going to settle and you can kind of sit back and you can wait to see how it plays out to see you could avoid all the costs of discovery completely. So, right now it's just we're basically trying to solve that problem of we have a large volume of documents that needs to be reviewed. We're generally using people, possibly using predictive coding. This is an option that's going to be superior to all of them. But as things evolve, I think that we know that there's going to be a lot of change in this industry as well as any others, and being able to evolve and look in the next, look towards the next step and the future. And it just goes to the number of opportunities available is so much higher in this industry right now than I've ever seen before. And I'm just excited to say, if we can get going on the goal of classifying large volumes of documents for attorneys, and now we're one of their trusted partners that they believe we understand the technology. They're going to us for help. They're going to us for guidance. We're helping them solve other problems that maybe they have some images that need to be looked at for certain things. And now we can start that conversation of, okay, what else can we do to save you money and time and make everything easier for you? And where can we move up the chain? And as the costs come down now, instead of loading all your data into a relativity database and then having AI review it, you could have it reviewed before it gets loaded. So now you're only loading in the hits on things that matter and you're saving a bunch of money on hosting. And we can talk about other ways that we can kind of move back up the EDRM and be able to just continually evolve and save money. And that's our business model, is to help clients use technology, specifically AI, to solve problems that they've had for a long time. And I think that we're starting out with one, but as it evolves, we're going to go, down, whatever path the industry is going to lead us. And the part that's really cool, and I mentioned how many different problems there are in eDiscovery, and you talk about eDiscovery, and you have collecting data and processing it and producing it and all of these different things. But 70% of all eDiscovery costs come down to the review portion. So, I'd like to say we're staying in our lane, but that lane is just really big. I mean, we, outside of that is, there's a lot of other problems that can be solved, but this one is really the majority of all cost and spending that go on in eDiscovery. So just a huge potential for disruption in the entire industry, where that's something that I'm looking around and seeing that I don't know if I think people realize it yet, how big this is going to be, because how big the review piece of eDiscovery is compared to everything else.
Yeah. So my past life as a litigator, I never worked on large enough matters that we have massive volume. So I've never actually used eDiscovery personally, but it doesn't mean that I didn't receive the sales pitches from eDiscovery people. And what I learned a little bit about that is that these like legacy eDiscovery platforms charge like sometimes by like the amount of storage space, so like megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes, whatever. Like, is that how you charge too, or do you charge like a different way? And realizing prices, specific dollar amounts, and the model may shift by the time this episode gets published. But at least at the time of recording, like in what way are you actually charging your users?
Yeah, and the industry has been typically charging per size. So hosting would be charged per gigabyte. How much data you're storing. And then, doc review was charged per document for a while before then they, went to the hourly billing, which is just a little bit less predictable. Our model is based on a per doc cost for review. So, we're trying to kind of balance, that we want to have predictability, simple pricing, and even now we're not even going with any subscriptions or any commitments. It's just, you want to review one document, run it through, it'll review that one document at a per doc charge. And so there's a couple of things that make it a little bit more complicated, because we're the cost of large language models is so high, and you're paying based on tokens. So a large document could cost significantly more than smaller documents. And right now, the max document size that tools like ours are reviewing, we're at 75 to 100 page documents. But if it's over that, it's just kind of cost prohibitive. Not that we couldn't do it as much as that it's going to cost more. And that, I think, might be something that ends up changing that logic, because if I'm reviewing a document that's 5,000 pages, that could cost us $200 to review, just because of the cost of large language models. So we might have to adapt, as we get that the maximum document size large enough, where we start charging either, some I have seen I've considered charging by characters or tokens or other things as well. But so for right now, we're trying to keep it as simple as possible because I don't want to have to explain what tokens are to a bunch of lawyers when we can just say per doc, everyone gets that.
Yeah, I mean, the way to do it would be you don't talk about per token, but you assume maximum amount of tokens maybe for every doc or like something like that,
And
right?
that's it.
Like,
So we basically have
yeah,
a max. We say we'll review documents up to 48,000 tokens at a flat rate.
yeah,
And that's, roughly 100 pages of text.
right. Yeah, because I agree with you. The last thing lawyers need to start thinking about is context windows and tokens and like other things. Like it's for those of us like deep into the AI world, we like to talk about that stuff. For the vast majority of lawyers who will be using this tech, they don't care. They just want just like their clients. This is a tip for lawyers. Just like your clients just want the results, just like you just want the results from the technology. Your clients just want the results from your legal services. So a good reminder there to be a little client centric with the way you think about practicing law. Yeah, it's super interesting. I'm like, I, we love the subscription model on Law Subscribed. I'm thinking about like how could that work for this type of a thing because there's like literal compute costs, and I don't love the idea of like a cost plus model, but like it's kind of a cost plus model is like or like a usage based model might even be it's harder to predict in terms of cost of something, so it gets rid of that simplicity, which is what you're going for now. But I do like with over time, I wonder with enough data, if there's a way that you could come up with a predictable subscription for power users that can just like, they know what it's going to be for the power users. They're paying for the cost of it or maybe a little bit less. And then for the non-power users, it's more profit for the company.
Yeah, and it could
Yeah.
be either, we've talked about having, subscriptions where you're just going to get a set volume of documents available over a period of time, and as you go, you kind of are burning through that, and that's similar to how some of the analytics tools have done in the past.
Right.
Then, as costs come down, I think that probably you'll get to a point where you are basically charging this much per gigabytes and do whatever you want to do with it, and kind of a little bit more of a flat rate upfront model. So it is interesting. There was a lot of discussion, internally with our team, and I know that a lot of the other players in the market have went back and forth. And I at these legal conferences, there's a lot of people from everywhere, and we're talking about different things and hearing about the rumors around, and that pricing model has been a difficult solution for a lot of people to solve or try to come up with an easier way. And we're always trying to make it easier to get adoption.
I mean, for law firms that they have consistent litigation, I think they would be willing to subscribe to, and maybe even, a reasonable amount, because then they'll at least have predictability, and you just have to calculate that if they were using it way more than maybe what was initially intended, how you could still make a profit from it. And then every other law firm you're just making a profit from, right? That's subscribing to that kind of a thing. Because that with the subscription model for legal services, it's like if somebody were to schedule 10, 15-minute calls with me in a row, like I would just drop them as a client. And so like you might just want to have it in your contracts that you could drop, subscribers if they're abusing the software, like outside the terms of use, right? And so like that could be an option there. But then for the company side, for this problem avoidance future that we talked about, it's a no-brainer subscription, right? Because like you can't anticipate after like a 6-month period moving into the future what the subscription should be so that they're getting value and your company's profitable. And now they're just subscribed for problem avoidance because that's easier to subscribe to than one-off litigation at a time, So yeah, I mean, I'm always trying to apply the subscription business model wherever I can, Jim. So that's what I'm trying to do.
And it is absolutely true that especially in eDiscovery, a lot of these are firms and companies that are just ongoing litigation all day, every day. And it's just, they have a team of people, they have a predictable number of cases, year over year, it's fluctuating a little bit, but not making, it's not a huge difference. And that does kind of open the door to something like that. You're right.
Yeah. And then when you have them subscribed and compute costs go down, which they predictably will, your profit margins increase over time once they're subscribed. Right. And so it's like one of those things where maybe at first it's break even, or if you get venture capital, it's maybe not break even, but it's competitive. And then over time, compute costs go down and you just start making money hand over fist because they're used to paying that amount and compute costs go down, right? And you can launch other features to keep them happy and all that stuff, right? But I can't help but try to push the subscription model on you, Jim. It's what we do here. It's
Well,
what I do.
there's so many benefits from a business standpoint. I mean, my accountants would absolutely love that, to be able to have, predictable revenue and things like that. So that's where, our I'd say our first step towards that is going to be, I think, this fall or maybe winter, having the ability to basically subscribe to a certain volume. So you're going to say, I'm going to review 1 million documents a year, and I'm going to be paid, I'm going to basically pay monthly for this at a flat monthly rate. And then when I exhaust those, I, kind of get to buy another batch, and, the amount I buy determines the cost. And what I've understood from
Like a car lease, like miles on a car lease, kind of is what that sounds like to me.
Exactly. It is exactly like car lease. But yeah, you can't drive to California and back every other day, or you're going to be over the limit. So
Right.
that's something I think is where we're going to get our starting point there. And I understand that a lot of clients really like that predictable pricing. So, when every month you're sending them a bill for differing amounts versus just, this is how much it's going to cost, the approval process on getting your bills paid is actually a lot faster too. And that's obviously important for, small organizations to make sure that they're getting paid on time, because it just requires less approvals when it's, the invoice is always going to be the same number.
Yeah, there was a past guest on the podcast, Jeff Carr, who is an in-house attorney, and he had the ACEs method. And one of those methods was like there's an evaluation at the end, which affects the price. And so I almost wonder if it's like you could do subscription, but maybe there's like a biannual check-in period for an evaluation on, is the price right? And it could be adjusted up or it can be adjusted down for future months on subscriptions based on past usage, kind of a thing. So that was an interesting model. So everybody go check out as a companion episode to this one, the Jeff Carr episode, after giving this one a listen. And that's, of course, also after you find Jim everywhere. So Jim, I do have one question for you after this that people should stick around for. But if people wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
All of our information is eDiscoveryAI.com. You can kind of research what we do, what we're offering. And I mean, probably the best way to get a hold of me, I'm just always on LinkedIn. So sending me messages on there is absolutely going to work. So between those two, you should be able to hunt me down pretty easily.
All right. So links to those in the show notes. And my last question for you, Jim, and why everyone sticks around to the end of the episode is a hot dog a sandwich, and why?
I'm going to say no. That's a bold move. And I'm going to say it's not a sandwich because you need the bread. It's, it just isn't quite there, though. I'm about 60-40. I'm not, this isn't the hill I die on. This, and I'll die on a lot of these types of hills. Like, you tell me you want the toilet paper over or under, that's a hill I die on. But I'll stick with, it is not a sandwich. Final answer, but yeah, not going to fight you to the death on it.
I think
a lot of solid arguments both ways.
And if you listen to every episode, you'll hear them. But that's the first time someone's assigned a percentage. I like that. 60-40. It is a sandwich.
I'll tell you, one thing I learned probably about a year ago that I thought was really helpful, both for business and personal, is define when you're going to fight to the death on something and define when it doesn't matter. Because the number of times that me and my wife would have a disagreement, and then it'd be just like, the reality is I'm like 55-45. So, like, let's not, like, this should not be the thing that ends up, we should fight about all day, because I don't really care that much. And being able to define what really matters versus what doesn't really matter that much too is, I think, really helpful in just solving problems in general. So,
all right, well, great. We'll not get any better than that. We'll sign off now. Jim Sullivan, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn, since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.